A long time ago, short, scary stories. Chapter 1, The Locked Closet. When I was just 7 years old, I lived in a haunted duplex. My grandma and I shared a small bedroom. My twin bed was pushed right up against the wall, and right beside it was a closet. Not just any closet. It was always locked. Tightly. My grandma kept a huge master lock on it. I never really asked why, but now that I think about it, maybe I didn't want to know. It was early fall, just past 2 in the morning. The house was silent. My grandma and I were asleep. The only light, a faint glow from the hallway. I was facing the wall, blankets tucked around me. Then the room turned cold. Not just chilly. I mean cold. So cold, I could see my breath. I thought, okay, maybe it's just the weather. So I pulled the blanket up and tried to fall back asleep. But then my bed began to move. It started slow, left to right, then harder. My body shifted with it. I kept my eyes shut tight. This isn't real, I told myself. I'm dreaming. But I knew I wasn't. Suddenly, the closet door began to rattle. Softly at first, then violently. It sounded like someone was inside, slamming against it, fighting to get out. The lock clanged and scraped against the wood. Over and over again. The noise was so loud it shook me and woke my grandma. She bolted upright, turned on the lights. But the banging didn't stop. It kept going and going and going. When it finally ended, she looked at me, and in Hmong she whispered, "Minaz, maybe it's just the wind from outside, moving the closet door. Go back to sleep." But her eyes were wide. Her hands were shaking. She didn't believe what she was saying. The next morning, she told my dad. He laughed it off. Said maybe it was just the wind. But my grandma said no wind could do that. A few nights passed. The house was quiet. Nothing happened. Then it came back. Again at 2 in the morning, the cold returned. The bed shook. And then the closet door exploded into chaos. It slammed and thrashed like something was trying to rip it from the hinges. This time, my grandma ran downstairs. She brought my dad up, and he saw it. He stood there, frozen, watching the closet door jerk and heave, the lock smacking wildly against the wood. He never laughed again after that. I was too young to understand. But now, after all the strange things I've seen since, I know the truth. There are things in this world that science can't explain. And that night was just the beginning. A long time ago, short scary stories. Chapter 2, The Knocking in the Basement. It happened when I was only 11 years old, but the memory still haunts me. My older brother had been staying up late in the big room at the front of the house, the one on the first floor. He was deep into his game, the glow of his screen lighting up the room, in the otherwise dark, quiet house. The night was still. Too still. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, the silence was broken by a faint sound. At first, it seemed like nothing more than the house settling, but then it came again. A knock. On the wall. From the basement. Soft at first, then louder and clearer. Knock. Knock. My brother thought it was just his imagination, but when it came again, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, confused, uneasy. He knocked back, just once, just to scare off whatever it was. But to his horror, the thing in the basement knocked right back. Mimicking him. Exactly. Terrified, he ran upstairs to our parents, and when he shared the story with us, I felt something settle into my chest. Dread. There was something strange, deeply wrong, happening in that house, and I couldn't ignore it. I slept just above my brother's room, with a thin wall between us, and the heating vent right by my bed. But that vent didn't just connect to his room. It went all the way down into the basement. The thought of it made my skin crawl, but it also intrigued me. Could the knocking have come from something or someone down there? Was I brave enough to find out? That night, I didn't sleep. I just watched the clock. The darkness around me, thick, heavy, like it knew what I was waiting for. When the clock finally read 5 a.m., I leaned in and pressed my ear to the cold, metal vent. I held my breath. The house was too quiet. Then, from deep in the darkness below, I heard it. Knock. Knock. The sound echoed up through the vent, so clear it was like it was in the room with me. My heart pounded. The cold crept up the walls and into my spine. And then, as if it knew I was there, it knocked again. Knock, knock. A perfect mimic. I yanked away from the vent. My breath was shallow, my body frozen. There was no one else in the room, no one but me, and whatever was down there, knocking in the dead of night, daring me to respond. After that night, the house never felt the same. The knocking continued, sometimes from the basement, sometimes through the vent, but no one ever spoke of it again. And to this day, we never had an explanation. Long ago, short scary stories. Chapter 3. It Follow. When I was in 4th grade, something happened to me that I've never forgotten. It started simple. I was supposed to go to my ELS teacher's room after lunch to practice Hmong dancing. After eating, I headed there. But when I arrived, the door was locked. No sign of her. I stood there for a moment, unsure, thinking maybe she went on a break. I looked toward the stairwell near the teacher parking lot, thinking about going outside for recess, but I realized there wasn't much time left. So instead, I decided to head back upstairs to wait in my classroom. Our 4th grade room was on the 2nd floor. You had to climb 2 sets of stairs to get there. The first flight, normal. But when I turned the corner and looked up the 2nd flight, I stopped cold. At the top of the stairs stood a girl, or maybe a woman. I couldn't tell. She was wearing a long white dress. It looked old, stained, like mold had soaked into it for years. Her body was still, too still, unnaturally still. Her arms and feet were blurry, almost like fog or a smudged shadow. But her face was worse, gray, blurry, like mist behind glass. But somehow, I knew she was staring at me. I looked down at my shoes, told myself it wasn't real. My eyes were playing tricks. But when I looked up again, she was closer, just slightly, but definitely. Panic hit me like ice water. I turned and ran, bolted down the stairs, heart hammering. When I reached the landing, I made the mistake of looking back. She was there, standing in the exact spot I had just been. I didn't even think. I sprinted past my ELS teacher's room, down the stairs to the teacher parking lot, took a sharp left, and didn't stop until I reached the playground. Out in the daylight, the fear faded just enough to breathe again. My elders used to say, if the hairs on your arms stand up and you feel that strange tingling deep in your spine, or even in your butt, it's real, real, real. I never told anyone what I saw. I tried to forget. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, a bad day, a story. But a few weeks later, something happened that shattered that lie. It was summer, hot, still. We had the porch door open for air. I lived on the 2nd floor of a duplex. I was watching TV when I got that feeling. The same one. That electric stillness. That presence. And then I just turned. There she was, standing right outside the porch door, looking at me. That same white dress, that same foggy face. I couldn't move. I didn't scream. I just looked down at my feet, again. Too afraid to look. Too afraid not to. I forced myself to look back up. She was gone. I crept to the porch, step by step, looked around, checked the sides, behind the railing, nothing. That night, I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. My body felt like it lifted, my spirit floating right out of me. I drifted toward the window, and she was there, waiting. She looked straight at me, with that blurred, ghostly face, and said, I can't come in, because of the talisman at your door. I jolted awake, heart racing, body drenched in sweat. I never told anyone. Not then. Not for years. After that, I stopped reacting. I ignored her. I stopped looking when I felt that feeling in my chest, and slowly the memories faded. But sometimes, when I'm alone, and the air goes cold, and the house gets too quiet, I wonder, is she still waiting? A long time ago, short, scary stories. Chapter 4, The Haunted Garden. It was one of those hot, heavy summer days. The kind where the air feels thick and everything moves a little slower. I was only 7 years old back then, and like every summer, my family and I spent our days out in the garden. We had 2 gardens on the same stretch of land, but between them was a forest. Not a big one, just a patch of trees and brush that separated garden number 1 in the south from garden number 2 in the north. That evening, just before sunset, My grandma asked my older sister, auntie, and me to walk over to garden number 2 to grab some fresh vegetables. We did as she said, and as the sun began to dip low behind the trees, we made our way back toward garden number 1. We were walking through the forest when I heard something. Crying and laughing, but not in a way that made sense. It sounded inhuman, like something was broken. I'd never heard anything like it before. I don't know if my auntie or sister heard it. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I was the youngest, and I walked a little slower, trailing behind with my tiny Mong basket full of vegetables. That's when I looked up and saw him. High up in the branches of a tree, sprawled out like a monkey, was a figure. Black, shadowed but solid. It looked like a man, but not a man. His shape was off. He was too still, too dark, like he had soaked in all the light around him, and he was staring at us, crying and laughing. Goosebumps raced up my arms. My stomach dropped. My auntie and sister turned, and without a word, they ran. So I ran too. But I couldn't help it. I looked back. And that thing, that figure, had fallen, dropped right out of the tree like a bag of bones. Just thud, flat on the ground. My vegetables spilled everywhere. But I didn't stop. I didn't care. I just ran. And the second the sunlight hit my skin on the other side of the trees, that tight, suffocating fear finally let go. I thought it was over. Just one strange, terrifying moment. But it wasn't the last. Another time, I was in garden number 1 with my older brother. We were pulling weeds, sweating under the summer heat, when, thunk! A rock landed right in front of us. We looked up. No one. We kept working. Thunk! Another rock, this one landing closer, right by my brother's foot. He picked it up and threw it back toward the tall grass, irritated. That was it. That was it. We were done for the day. The sun was setting anyway, and our grandma was ready to head home. We got into the van and started buckling in. Then, bang! A rock slammed into the rear passenger window. My grandma jumped. "Time to go home," she said in Hmong, her voice shaking. She started driving down the dirt road toward the main street, and just before we turned off, bang! Another rock. Harder this time. It struck the back window with a crack. We didn't wait around to see where it came from. My grandma hit the gas. We never talked about it again. But years later, 13 to be exact, I found myself back near that same land, working as a community service officer. By then, the forest was gone. The city had cleared it out and built an apartment complex on top of it. One day, I was riding shotgun with a police officer on patrol. As we drove past the apartments, she said something that chilled me to my core. "You know," she said, "there used to be a mental institution on that land. It was shut down a long time ago. They demolished the buildings. After that, people started renting the land for gardening." I didn't say a word, but deep inside, I knew the truth. Something had always been there, and maybe it still is. A long time ago, short scary stories. Chapter 5. The Man Behind the Door. I was 12 years old when it happened. It was a cool summer evening, the kind where the air's still warm but breezy and you can hear the birds chirping, like they're whispering to each other before they sleep. The sun had already dipped below the trees, and shadows stretched long between the houses. My half-sister lived just 2 houses down, and that night, she asked me to babysit her 2 little boys and her baby girl so she and her husband could go out. We always used her back door. It was quicker from our house and led right up into her kitchen. So, I crossed the parking lot, opened the back door like I always did, and stepped inside. The stairs creaked under my feet as I started going up, but then something weird happened. I tried to close the door behind me, and it didn't shut all the way. It bounced back, like it hit something soft. It felt like a hand had been there, a hand I couldn't see. I turned around, nothing. But something in the air, it wasn't right. I shook it off, shut the door tight, and started climbing again. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Heavy, ragged, gasping for air. And it was coming from below me. From the basement. It wasn't just breathing, it was moving. Like footsteps. Slow, steady, climbing the stairs from the darkness below. Then, it stopped. I froze. My whole body locked up. Time felt slow. The air around me got cold. I forced myself to run, but as I ran up the steps, I accidentally glanced back, just under my arm. Now, in Hmong culture, the elders say if you run and glance under your arm or between your legs, you might see something from the other world. And I did. There was a man, standing at the foot of the stairs. I couldn't see his face, just from his neck to his knees. He was white, wearing old, faded blue jeans and a stained white-collared shirt. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me. And I knew. He knew I had seen him. I reached the top and kicked the kitchen door open so hard it slammed into the wall. My sister came running out. "Why'd you kick the door so loud?" she asked. "What's wrong?" I could barely breathe. "I saw something," I told her, "and I'm scared." A few days later, my grandma told us something. She said when she was babysitting my nephews in that same kitchen, they suddenly started crying. They pointed to the back door, and they said they saw something. Something that wasn't human. Years passed. I grew up, became a police officer. 13 years after that night, I was patrolling with one of the older officers on the force. We were driving through my old neighborhood when we passed by that house, my sister's old place. I looked at it. The paint peeling, the porch light dead, the windows black like eyes. The officer noticed. "You know that place?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I used to go there when I was a kid. My sister lived there." He got real quiet. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "I had a call there a long time ago. A guy hung himself in the basement. Something about a complicated relationship." My throat tightened. I stared out the window, and all I could think about was that breathing, that stained shirt, the man I saw at the foot of the stairs. Then the officer looked at me again and said, "They said he did it out of anger." He didn't say anything else, and I didn't ask. We just drove away. But as we passed the house, I looked back, and I felt it. Felt it staring at me, waiting. And I noticed a new family lives there now. I wonder, do they ever witness what I saw?